This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, it's about 10 o'clock at night. Just not done watching Jeremy Saulnier's new film, Rebel Ridge. I had seen the trailer a little while back. I think I knew he had a movie on the way. And then I was just randomly watching trailers and started watching that. I was like, this looks interesting. Then it said it was directed by him. And I was like, okay, I'll probably stop watching this trailer now. But I guess I got the initial concept of like lone guy versus cops. There's more to the film than that, but that is basically the setup. Very fresh from it now. Literally just finished watching it like 2 minutes ago, so I'm sure I'll kind of chew it over and digest it a bit more over the coming couple of days. But I thought I'd just kind of give some thoughts now, sort of fresh, having watched it, especially seeing I'm liable to forget half of what was in the movie, I'm sure, like I always do. But in terms of Jeremy Saulnier, I liked his first movie. Well, I don't know if it was actually his first movie. I think he might have made a movie called Red Room or something. But the breakout movie with Macon Blair, Blue Ruin, I thought was fantastic. Now, when it's like an unknown director, unknown actor, unknown like whole where the hell did this come from type thing, one has a tendency to kind of overrate it, I think. So if I return to Blue Ruin now, it might not be quite as incredible as I remember it, but certainly my one viewing of it was like, this is brilliant. And I was very eagerly anticipating his follow-up, which was like more of a star-studded cast, Green Room. And I liked Green Room quite a lot. I can't in any way sort of remember what the difference was between Blue Room and Green Room. I mean, there's many differences that I can remember, but in terms of just the way the tension is built up and released and everything plays out, I remember feeling that Green Room was like maybe a little more simplistic or a little more predictable or basic, and maybe a little too reliant on extreme violence. As much as I love extreme violence, but it just felt like that was one of the biggest things that it had up its sleeve. And I guess it's a less interesting dynamic. You got like our heroes, and they got mixed up with neo-Nazis, and then they're going to be in peril, but they're going to kill all the neo-Nazis. And it's like, that's, I guess, less interesting in a way than Blue Ruin, where it was like, what the fuck is this guy up to? Like, what is this? You really were in discovery mode throughout it. Then I think he made a film called Hold the Dark, if I'm remembering correctly. Can't remember if that was him or that was someone else, but I do remember there was a film that came out, I think with Jeremy Renner, could be wrong on that was after Green Room and was a step down, like about 20 steps down. I remember thinking it was pretty bad. And you'd think at that point he would just disappear off into directing blockbusters or whatever, maybe like make the new Venom movie or whatever. But thankfully, he's back with a written and directed by him original story, very much in the vein of Blue Ruin and Green Room, almost like a mixture between the two. Because I'm going back to years ago memory, but Blue Ruin, if I'm not mistaken, starts kind of on an open road. Maybe it doesn't start on an open road, but it certainly is pretty quickly like a guy out on the road, propulsive, like, what's he going to do? How's he going to survive? All that kind of stuff. And then Green Room is you take a sort of classic boogeyman from society, in that case, neo-Nazis, and you just have like a whole bunch of bad neo-Nazis and they're bad, and, you know, innocent characters get caught up in the midst of them, and you know, how's it going to go down? This is the same with corrupt cops. Although it's interesting because Green Room, like many movies, they take a type of baddie that everyone is so opposed that they use that as an excuse to let us enjoy uber violence against them. Whereas in this one, interestingly enough, even though they've set up a type of baddie that you would think, given a lot of the early parts of this movie, they're basically just there so that you can feel some sort of release when they get like completely mutilated. But our hero in this film, played by Aaron Pierre, who I've only seen in Old by M. Night Shyamalan, which is not a good way to be introduced to any actor, but he's very compelling in this movie. His character in this movie is, I don't know if I would say anti-violence. I mean, it's that classic thing of like, in martial arts, and we find out that he is a martial arts expert, I think it'd be fair to say. In martial arts, they talk so much about how it's all about controlling the situation and basically avoiding violence. And it's like, it's a form of really disciplined, controlled physical capability that you hold, which means that nobody needs to get hurt, kind of thing. But then when you look at martial arts movies, it's always just like them just completely going to town on everyone. And in this movie, the word de-escalation is used many times in the film, and it is the best example, and one of the only examples, certainly the best example I've ever seen in a movie of a character whose MO is legitimately de-escalation. There's a lot of overlap, at least superficially, between this and Reacher, Jack Reacher, the Tom Cruise movies and the Amazon Prime TV series, in that we've got like an ex-military badass who is like, you know, like reached the top of his kind of level of capabilities and stuff in the military. Now he's like a sort of lone wolf roaming the landscape and getting mixed up in some small town full of corruption, and they didn't know what they were up against, kind of thing. But Reacher, at least in the Amazon TV series, takes every opportunity to just commit as much murder as possible. Now, of course, they establish the people he's murdering as being like bad, but it's just funny how often you're watching someone who's like, now this guy's probably skilled enough to not actually have to kill everyone, but they're killing for our entertainment. Whereas in this movie, and this is one of my favorite things about the film, he legitimately makes every effort and succeeds in just not killing people. Like it's actually like really unique and really exhilarating to watch, like a adrenaline pumping gung-ho action sequence like the final shootout, where he's going around just picking up guns and unloading them, shooting like smoke bombs, beanbag rounds, tripping people up, like basically doing everything he can to de-escalate the situation and make sure that nobody gets killed. Of course, if he did kill a police officer, he'd be in prison for life, but even still, it doesn't feel like that's his motivation. It's that he is competent enough to get what he wants with minimal damage and loss of life and all that kind of stuff. because although if you take that component out of it, it's a very it's a not a particularly exciting action scene, which sort of brings me onto like the journey I went on with this movie. I love a movie that just throws you straight in to the action. I think film starts with him cycling along the road. It's like Iron Maiden or someone that he's listening to, and police car starts sort of swerving around in the background, and then just like bumps into the back of his bike and starts some like bullshit arrest on him. And I'm like, oh great, straight in. And that's kind of what I want from Saulnier. I've liked him as a director who knows what you want to see in a movie and knows how to entertain you and doesn't want to waste your time with bullshit. Like, for example, there's no love story between Aaron Pierre and the blonde girl in it. Like 9 movies out of 10 that would doing this would do a love story between the two of them. But that's just doing something out of obligation when it serves no entertainment purposes. So I think certainly in Blue Ruin, and I would say in Green Room, like I even remember like the early scenes in Green Room where they're like a touring band and they're like, robbing gasoline from a car to get to another place, and they're like trying to find a gate. It's all like, give me something entertaining, give me something of value. And the first, I want to say like 45 minutes, 50 minutes of this movie is really strong. And now I think you and I watched Rambo First Blood a few months ago. Of course, we've both seen it before. And I know that we both had an amazing time with that rewatch. I think as soon as this movie starts, one can't help but think of First Blood. That's not to say that it's the same, or like it's not a comment on how similar it is. Could be completely superficial similarity, or you could argue that it's a very similar movie. But in any case, you immediately think of that. And First Blood is not only a masterpiece, but it's such a lean movie, and there are points of comparison about the ratcheting up, like they're pushing him further and further and this, that, and the other. The characters are not similar at all. Like Rambo is completely out of control, and this guy is completely in control. Well, he's as in control as he can be. Now he's going up against the law, a big apparatus that ultimately has more power than him in the early stage of the movie, when he's sort of compliant or whatever. So things don't necessarily go his way, but that kind of building up, and that, like, there's just so many great scenes of the maneuvering, the push and pull between two characters. You can feel the tension and the simmering, like, what's going to happen here? Is he going to explode? Is he going to go along with this? Is he making a play? Is he gaining an inch here? Or like the first 45 minutes or an hour of this movie is very clean, and just one guy is coming to town. We don't quite know what's going on. We don't quite know what he wants or who he is or where he's come from or this, that, and the other. But we know that he is in opposition to the police force, and we're just on the edge of our seat trying to see, A, how's it going to go down, and B, just enjoying this building tension that feels like, especially knowing Saulnier's work, that it's only going to kind of reach explosive heights eventually. And I found that ratcheting up of the tension really good. I was quite curious in the early scenes about what his background was. Like, for example, one of my sort of theories rattling around in my brain as I was watching it is like, maybe he's the sort of the bad guy. Maybe he's just trying to pay this bail bond and get this guy out of jail so he can kill that guy, right? It turns out he's completely on the level. He's just like, everything he says is more or less full transparency. He's just a guy who is trying to get his cousin out of jail on some bullshit charge, and he wants to prevent the guy from getting killed in prison because of an earlier thing that he did in informing on someone else or whatever. But it feels, or at least it felt to me, like there was going to be more plot there. Like, for example, this Chinese restaurant guy doing a Chinese accent on the phone, but doesn't really have one. Says he's part owner in it, or was, and why is he tied to, like, that whole what that is, that organization / restaurant. I mean, we're really left without much clarity on whether the restaurant is a front for something, or what is he? Is he an employee of a crime syndicate, or those just friends of his? Unless I'm missing something, I think that's left quite vague. And it's elements like that, and elements like, why do you want to get this guy out of prison, and why do you have to do it so quickly, and why does he have so much financial resources that he's able to do it, and even just why is he on a bike, like, doing this job? There's a lot of mystery, I would say, there, that made me think maybe this is a mystery movie, but it's not at all. If there isn't really anything there, and really it's just a guy with a bunch of money going to pay bail, and he gets stopped, and then that's the beginning of a conflict between him and the police that escalates. Now, I probably would have enjoyed if there had been more of an interesting plot, and I felt like, I don't know if it's just me latching on something that wasn't there, but I did feel like there was a sense of mystery plotting in the early stage of the film, but then just like fizzles out and goes nowhere. But still, I enjoyed the first 45 minutes, 50 minutes of the movie as a sort of, just like Deliverance, just like First Blood, just like any of these movies where it's like a simple, characters are in a situation and we're just going to slowly turn up the heat, just get things more and more tense. There's great music work. There's great, even like little touches, like when he's outside talking to her in that kind of little tight alleyway spot where she says she's going for a smoke, and then at the end of the scene he like goes around a corner and a train goes by in front of me. It just feels like there's energy is just building up. I liked that. Now, unfortunately, after that, it kind of breaks the tension, unlike First Blood, where it's just like a direct linear thing of like more and more police after him, it's all immediate, it's all like almost in real time practically. In this one, we reach a point where he gets tasered, and that's a really cool scene where he like pulls the taser out of the guy's hand or whatever, but then it kind of cuts to black and he wakes up in prison, and then the movie stops being that like, I know it's not literally in real time because it's over like 24 hours or something, but that straight line, and then it becomes more of a conspiracy thriller. We got to find the evidence, we got to interview this guy, is it James Cromwell, we got to like piece together this, we've got her involved, we got her backstory with her kid, and we got there's more, like, it becomes more of a classic sort of fairly plot heavy thriller, when I think what this film does best is anytime it comes down to a very immediate situation. It's him and another person in a space, or it's him physically trying to navigate through an environment or whatever. That's when it's, I think, very, very entertaining. The thriller plot stuff is like, I just don't think that this film does that in a particularly special way. I don't think it's awfully bad, but it's certainly no better than like TV quality. I'll go back to Reacher, like the plot in the Reacher TV show is always like just really dull and boring and fairly predictable. And I would say that of this, like when it's leaning more towards plot, I'm getting more and more bored. I'm going, why has it been 15 minutes since we've had a tense scene of him facing off with someone? You know what I mean? But of course we get back to that territory, and the final, I guess, 20 minutes, 25 minutes is more, oh, you thought he was here, but he's actually there. And now he's doing this. And it's all, back to that. I think, again, what makes the film entertaining. So it was kind of a mixed bag for me. But a movie I liked quite a lot, a return to form for Song Hye. Probably just straight now, without having had any chance to sort of sit with the movie and think about it and digest it properly, I would probably feel like third best film by him, just because of some of that, like it goes a little bit too unfocused, or at least it's less focused than the Green Room and Blue Ruin. Although Blue Ruin, like, barely remember anything about. I just remember that I really liked it. So I could be overrating it a bit, but yeah, I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I definitely feel like there's a discovery here for me in Aaron Pierre. Like I said, I've only seen him in old. I think his looking at him now on IMDb, he seems to be very much like an actor, and my assumption watching the film was that they had hired a martial artist or something. And I was like, how is this guy so good at acting when he's clearly looking at his body, looking at his physical capabilities in all the fight scenes? Like, there's like a long continuous shot where he has to like crawl under a car and like flip someone over his shoulder. And there might be some digital stitching together there that I didn't pick up on, but he does have to pull off quite a lot in this movie. So looking at him now online, it looks like the acting is actually his forte and what he's mainly experienced in, and all the physical stuff is maybe stuff that he picked up for this movie. But on the basis of this, I mean, I think back to when Die Hard came out, and people were like, you can't cast Bruce Willis in an action movie. Like, he's like he's a funny guy. He's like an actor, character actor type thing. So maybe this would be another case of that. Like, how many good action movies out there are available to him? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him plopped straight into the old MCU now. But yeah, he was a really, really good thing. I like all the cops. The cop that's kind of like the main, not the chief, but the most hateable cop. Let me see. Let me go to IMDb, see if I can figure out what his name is. The chubbier guy, Emery Cohen. So I think he was in Place Beyond the Pines, and he was in the TV show The OA. That I've seen him in a few other things as well. He's in Brooklyn. I actually really like him as an actor, and like whenever I see him pop up and stuff, I'm like, oh, I like this guy. I thought he was pretty good in this movie. I do think that there's a possibility that a different actor could have done it, like even more hateable performance there. Like, on the one hand, it's like he classically plays these more sort of soft beta male type characters, and I always like when they go sort of play someone against type, and maybe if you think about the fact that like the character he's playing is supposed to be someone who's only powerful because of the badge and the gun, not because he's actually just like a pathetic person. So in that regard, it actually worked quite well. But there was just a level of like, oh my God, I fucking hate this guy. That like he went to 8, he didn't go to 10 in that regard. But at the same time, he does go to 8, and I think it really works. I also like how horrible the police department is in this. Like, if you're going to make a movie where the baddies are basically a corrupt police force, which we've seen 1,000 times before and is very often just like really just boring, and you're like, yeah, I get it. All right, they're corrupt. So what? In this movie, the way they like are basically like trying to get her um like fired for using heroin, and like all of the little manipulations they do, and even just the way they tell him the news of his cousin's death, and just there's so many little subtle touches that make me go like, they're just so horrifically bad and so in control, and so like that apparatus that they've set up of like, pick them up, get the money, throw them in jail for 90 days, tapes get wiped, bring them before the judge lets them off. Like it's such a, unfortunately, realistic. I mean, I'm not saying this stuff is like the norm or widespread, but I've definitely heard cases like this where you go like, they just came up with a nice little bureaucratic engine that just allowed them to do whatever they want, kind of thing. And they're also not like what they're doing is so banal in a way. Like, I like baddies, or obviously not in the real world, but for this movie, I like that they went, no, they have a thing that they run. It's almost like a con that they run that, if you think about it, would work. Now, I don't know how much money you can get in these kind of seizing funds on the road, but because they said he brought in 100K in what his first, I can't remember the exact timelines, but seems to have been quite lucrative for them. Yeah, so there are bits in the movie where you go, and I think we have recently had a massive conversation about like plot holes or things you've got to buy when it as it pertains to The Last Seduction and the work of John Dahl. In fact, in that conversation, I said that maybe Jeremy Saulnier was like a person, like a not quite like John Dahl, but like, one of these people who are making their own. It's not a sequel, it's not a franchise, it's a crime movie that's a standalone thing. Now, they're very different in energy. Certainly, John Dahl's movies are never heading towards like action or extreme violence or whatever. But anyway, there are things in this movie here and there that I don't buy. I don't really want to like get into that conversation again, because it's a bit tedious, and I think it's one of these things where like we end up talking about it way more than we care about it, and it almost like creates the narrative in our conversation like this is some sort of big sticking point or stumbling block, when I'm sure for both of us, when we see things in the movie that we consider kind of bullshit, there isn't much friction there. It's just like, yeah, whatever. It's only if it's like the whole movie was reliant on that thing holding true, and then they undercut that, then it does make a difference. But in this case, it was more just like little throwaway details where I was like, okay, all right, whatever. But yeah, a good movie. I hope that he makes his money. I mean, I think it's a Netflix movie, so we'll never find out the kind of business behind it. The only way you can ever find out how well something's done at Netflix is if Netflix decides to give him money to do another movie or a bigger movie, or I guess every now and again Netflix decides to sort of proudly proclaim the viewing figures for Stranger Things or Squid Game or something. But most of it is just like a black hole. So I hope that people are watching it. It is like a movie that I think could have really benefited from a cinema release. certainly like, a big widescreen film experience and quite intense. I don't know if it's gotten any showcasing anywhere. I mean, it's also like practically impossible to get people to the cinema to see these kind of movies. So I on a business level, I get it. But for the smallish amount of people that would actually go and check this out in the cinema, I kind of feel a bit sad for them. Now, me with, a baby and a toddler and everything, I just probably wouldn't have made it out, especially having really, really disliked his last movie. So I'm one of the vast majority of people who are just like slide into the convenience of just watching this at home in my own time, my own comfort. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if we get more from him. Yeah, be interesting to know what you thought. I think it's an easy movie to watch. I guess it's a type of movie that I think just sort of try to predict like your thoughts on it really. Like, I think when this movie starts, I'd imagine both of us are feeling like, cool. I know what's going on. I know what we're doing. It doesn't really, you don't really need to figure out the stakes. It's like, guys being stopped. These cops are heavy-handed. What's in the bag? Oh, there's money in the bag. Are they going to take it? Like I like that kind of building blocks storytelling. And then I suppose what would be interesting to know is if you were on that kind of sustained journey of engagement the whole way through the movie, or if, like me, you sort of felt it started to sputter a bit when we get more into a sort of conspiracy thriller. But, certainly it circles back into something more direct and something more in his hand. I felt his motivation sometimes was a bit like, it is explained. He does say, oh, well, when they offered me the money, I was happy and I took it, but then I realized I had to do the right thing, come back, and then I felt like it's not that his journey and his decision stuff don't make sense. It's more that, like, is this giving me the most entertainment value that I could have out of the movie? Like, just don't even bother having him leave town for 20 seconds before the girl calls him and he has to come back. Like, just some of the journeying in the movie was a bit like, do we really need to be doing this? Could we be tightening this up a little bit? It's 2 hours and 10 minutes. It doesn't really feel like it needs to be that long. I feel like some of the plot points and turns and things in the movie could probably be shed away. But yeah, anyway, I had a really good time with it, and yeah, hope you did too.
Hey man, just getting back to you probably 2 days after you've seen Rebel Ridge now on a Saturday. Just had a lovely dock type meal down below in this restaurant at the bottom of my building. Some stuff now, and I've got some of the football on in the background. Just getting back to you about Rebel Ridge. Yeah, I saw it last night after coming back from the cinema after seeing the remake of Speak No Evil, which I had a really good time with. So I was already in the cinema type of mode, so I had more popcorn and went straight into Rebel Ridge. My relationship with Jeremy Saulnier is, I remember Blue Ruin coming out to a lot of acclaim. I thought it was fine, like decent, not amazing. I thought it was decent, certainly enough to admire about his aesthetic and his vibe and how he sets an eerie feeling almost to the scene that something's going to happen and it's very unnerving. I like that style enough to continue with him. Not that Blue Ruin I didn't have a good time with either. I don't want to give that impression. I just remember it being so hyped that I was expecting a lot from it. Now, the other thing is, I don't remember Blue Ruin. Blue Ruin and Animal Kingdom are two titles that are almost like the same movie in my head, even though I know absolutely nothing about either anymore. I just remember vibes and threat of violence and bad shit going down, but I actually don't remember. You reminded me a little bit when you spoke about Blue Room. I really liked Green Room. That's the one where I had such a good time with. Um, yeah, that I thought that was really good. Patrick Stewart was very good. It was a very good setup that the punk band just happened to be in this backwater place and witness a murder, and then they're just stuck in between this moment and stuck in this room. So it's almost like a home invasion movie, but obviously it's not because they're in someone else's home, so to speak, and in the VIP area of that club. Thought that was really good. And there's a lot of detestable characters, but a lot of the violence from that movie comes from the violence we get from the characters that we actually like. Again, I don't remember too much about it, except a guy that had a soft spot for Anton Yelchin, isn't it? I think I liked him as an actor. And then after that, another Netflix exclusive movie by Jeremy Saulnier. I don't remember the name of it, but it's got James Badgedale, the guy from The Departed. You mentioned the name of it there. Didn't really have a great time with that either. I thought it was fine. Obviously preferred Blue Room. Definitely preferred The Green Room. And I think the movie The Red Room you're talking about is a movie that I recommended to you that I saw 2 days ago. That's nothing got to do with Jeremy Saulnier. Maybe that's why that's got in your head. So yeah, coming into this, I was still optimistic. I like the guy. I like Jeremy Saulnier. I like even his failures to an extent. I mightn't be having the best time with it, but it's something that's different. And some of these movies, you feel like, okay, that wasn't my Jeremy Saulnier movie, but I'm going to get a Jeremy Saulnier movie that I really will get, and it will just be the feeling that I'm going to get. It's going to be just pitch right for me, in the same way that something like Blue Room was pitched right for other people. And I felt like I got that with Green Room, and I feel like I'm definitely going to get it again with him throughout his career. So I'm quite comfortable watching movies that don't quite work by this guy, because he's got a lot going on. So Rebel Ridge, the actor Aaron Pierre, I haven't seen old at all, but I thought he was very good in this. This is kind of what happens when you get I wouldn't say he's like him in any way, but a spiritual successor to Clint Eastwood type character who rides into town and gets hassled by the corrupt law in a Western. Except this is a racially charged America, and this is kind of the experience of someone who is on the other side of that, as in an African American. So I think his character and his performance is the thing that glues this film together. Absolutely brilliant, both physically, temperamentally, and he's got a great aura to him. And while Clint Eastwood, his character is a disdain and a grumpiness and an almost misanthropic interaction with characters as he rides into town. The character played by Aaron Pierre, he's got something along the lines of, he's got a calmness and a stillness, but it's a calmness and a stillness born out of having to put up with this through his whole life. Obviously, this isn't there in the text per se. It's not literally said, but there is certain things from his performances that you can kind of glean from it, and I think that's why it works so well. that he is living in America. He's living in these towns because obviously the restaurant he works for that he owns is not far from this place, presumably, because the cop himself says, "Oh, I know that restaurant. I ate there. It's very good." So obviously he lives in these kind of backwater places. And I think how he carries himself is very interesting. He's calm, but he's calm with an undertone of, I am sick of this shit. I have to be as calm as possible because these untrained idiots are very unprofessional, probably shouldn't be in the level of authority they are. And he carries himself, I wouldn't say like I'm better than them, but I'm much more capable than you. And obviously, when you add into the fact that he had this military background, albeit in America, then that makes sense as well, because the army, by all accounts, is a lot more professional, and you have to go through higher levels of intensity and training than your average local hick cop. Now, obviously, we don't find that out until later what he does. So what we're opened with in the beginning of the movie of him cycling down the road, getting nudged off his bike by the cop, and then, like you said, this is a movie that preaches de-escalation from its main character. However, everything he does just by wading through this environment, trying to compete and complete his task, results in escalation by people who are too big for the badge. I mean, too small for the badge, should I say? Too incompetent, too much of an ego, probably racist, even though it's not inherently said. You do get that impression. And it just adds to a nice mix of characters. And obviously, I feel like the main character actually almost is a little bit autistic in his mind. He's got a different logic, and I can't remember everything he said, but when he talks about the different things, it's almost like he's very rigid in his rules and his own morality. If he makes the deal, he'll stick to the deal, even if his deal is negated by Don Johnson, who's the sheriff. Plays a piece of shit quite well between this and movies like Django. I also thought Nash Bridges was a piece of shit, but that's just me. So he's got this code and he's got this thought process where he goes through things that he has to do to avoid escalation and things he has to try and do. Make a deal, make a compromise. But now when all those things are exhausted, he's left with no choice. And that's pretty cool, seeing a character like that. It's pretty cool, a character that seems calm, but also emotional. I've never seen an actor that has been able to keep quite a monotone, I'm over expression, while also doing very well at showing emotion at the same time. So obviously we find out later what the character does and his intention. So at the beginning of the movie, he gets knocked off the bike. And like you said, very interesting stuff. Oh, where's he going? Where's he going in such a hurry? What's going to happen with the cops? Oh, what's in the bag? Oh, there's money in the bag. Oh, interesting. I wonder where he's going. So there's so many questions early on, and that's really cool. And when we find out stuff little by little, like you mentioned, it's more building blocks. Oh, we're getting to something here. We're getting to something. It's building. Very good. And okay, now he's trying to get out his cousin. Why does his cousin need to get out by this point? We're just constantly bombarded with an answer and another question. And it's really good in those earlier stages. And I, like you, definitely felt there was some kind of mystery element to it that just seemed to fizzle out, unfortunately. And like you, I thought the first 45 minutes were, if it was that time, was very strong. But I gotta hand it to Solomon, man. Even in those moments where the movie isn't working, and obviously when it's working very well for the first half of the movie, we get a lot of really good moments, really good scenes. He's a very good scene guy, isn't he? I really like where obviously the cops rip them off, and just how he goes about stuff is not what you'd expect early on. When his money gets taken, he walks into the police station and he starts filing a police report for his money being robbed, and then he implicates the two cops. That's brilliant. And then obviously Don Johnson completely underestimates him and looks at him like that he's better than him, and why is he questioning his authority? And then we get this absolutely brilliant scene where you just know something explosive is going to happen. And that's the scene where he comes back the next day, the main guy, Aaron Pierre, and he's just stand outside the police station. And just before this, where have this scene where the cops are looking through his backstory and they're trying to find out, okay, he did this, he did that, nothing special. And then the Wi-Fi goes out, and you're just like, oh man. Like, well, when the Wi-Fi goes out initially, you think to yourself, oh, the Wi-Fi's out. And then it slowly clicks to you, oh, they're going to want to find out information. And Don Johnson just walks out and he thinks he has the upper hand. He's just done a background check on this guy and he's absolutely nothing. And the cops are just trying to get that Wi-Fi up. And then they're like, oh, man, this guy. And obviously you get the initials of what he's trained in and you're trying to work it out. And then they find out, oh, he's a martial arts expert in I think it's the army or whatever, he used to train people. And then at that point, you have Don Johnson just trying to bring him down to size. And now the audience are ahead of Don Johnson. And you're thinking, oh, shit. And then the Aaron Pierre guy starts talking about the only letters you need to worry about is this, and that, and tells him just, have you left me with no choice just to get this point? And then the Emre Cohen cop comes out, and then it just gets really good. Scenes like that are absolutely fantastic. And then obviously unhands them. And you mentioned it is really good to see a movie that's an action movie that doesn't resort to a bloodbath. And you know what? The way he does that, it's almost like the fighting language that would match the persona. It's pretty cool. It's almost like if every personality had a fighting style, there'd be none better matched than what Aaron Pierre does in this, based on how he speaks. You would imagine if a character fought like they spoke, this is what it would look like. And the way he doesn't kill them while gets the best of them is kind of akin to emasculation, isn't it? It's very emasculating to see these cops be absolutely cocked, basically, by this guy who doesn't even have to resort to killing them in order to get the better of them. Like, he's so cool and he's just so on top of things that when Don Johnson pulls the gun on him, he just unloads the gun, just takes him out, puts him in an arm lock, and just bests the whole police department. And then we get these scenes that were paid off when he obviously did a recon of the police station beforehand, and he realizes who's on shift, who else is on shift. I just love stuff like that where we get these people who are just really good at their job and just a lot better than everyone. And another scene that stood out to me very good as well is when I think that's either the same day or the day, no, it probably is. I can't remember which order this is in, but when he arrives to, basically Don Johnson makes a deal with him that, okay, if you come down, you'll be able to see your cousin. And then he arrives 3 minutes late, according to Don Johnson, and the prison truck is gone. And we just see him cycling along on the bike. Like, this is great stuff. Like, it's not amazing has to happen. We were talking about this the other day. When are we going to see scenes that aren't crazy action sequences to just get us our amazing cinema moments? And there was a moment when we were talking about The Fisher King where it's just two characters talking. Well, this is fucking great. The way we just see him take off on his bike, he's cycling down through shortcuts. The prison van is going away. He's cycling up to the prison van, looking every bit the badass, and obviously his physicality is really good. And we just see him pumping to the bicycle, catching up to the van, and then talking to his cousin, and then I can't remember what happens. He goes a little bit further and he can't fist bump him, but then it comes about, no, I'm going to fist bump you. And the way he cycles back, that's such a good scene out of nowhere. That's brilliant. It just shows how relentless he is. It shows how much he cares for his cousin. It shows what he's prepared to do. It shows his intensity. And it's just something different, isn't it? It's not a shootout. It's not a real emotional talking scene. It's just another way to do something to accomplish your goal. And that's what I like about Solner. He's very good at just giving us these scenes. And the other thing I like as well, I really like when bad guys, obviously they're really bad and they're really detestable, don't get me wrong. But obviously bad guys, there's this thing that you see with chimpanzees that I read. Maybe I heard somebody talking about it, and it was like chimpanzees, the most aggressive chimpanzees, will get torn apart by the rest of the chimpanzees. So it's the ones that don't go around as a loose cannon that much, but still can hold the rule. They're the ones that prosper. And I really like in some of these movies, and especially this, that obviously these guys are police. Obviously we're seeing them at their worst, but they have to at least be competent enough not to cause so much shit in their everyday lives. And we have to believe that this is an escalation on the police's part too, because they've come across a character that they don't like and that's in opposition to them. So it is important to show these type of characters who are really unlikable and really extreme, that they're not actually going around extreme all the time. And we get this great scene where Don Johnson shows up again. And obviously we don't fully know what's happened. Aaron Pierre's cousin at this point. And Don Johnson's, well, first of all, we get this great scene. And this is great building again, where the other cop, I can't remember his name. Let me get the IMDb, not the Emre Cohn character, the David Denman, gets in the car and he says, you really want to listen to what this guy says, what the sheriff says, do yourself a favor. And then that's another little question. We get back to the questions. Oh, what's he going to talk to him about? And then he says, a great scene and great bit of dialogue that just adds more than the normal cardboard cutout scenarios. Don Johnson says, if I knew who you were, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But we are where we are, and I'm going to give you a one-time deal just to get the hell out of town. I think he even gives him the cash, buys him the car. I don't know if he knows his cousin is dead at this point, but he probably knows that, if his cousin does die, this is gonna fucking, the shit will hit the fan with this guy. And we don't need this because we need to go about our business as we've been doing, just making quite a bit of money by doing something very bureaucratically bullshit. And that's a great scene. It's like Uncle Jack in Breaking Bad, where he gives Walt one barrel back after he bests him and take all his money. It says all his greed is a bit sickening. I like when they throw in a bit of personality rather than the James Bond villain to these bad guys, where he's might be the chief of police and he might be a piece of shit, but he is trying to find another way out of this besides murder and besides an escalation in the way that we typically would get. Like you, I felt the film was best in the first hour. I liked the best when there was a mystery, lots of questions, lots of momentum. And then we get to the point after he manages to take the money to the bail office with the bail clerk played by Steve Zissou, of course, as we know from that Mark Duplass TV show that I no longer remember. God, what was it called? Togetherness. Nice to see him in another movie that's not Mumblecore. And up until that point, you still have a lot of questions. And then he gets arrested and he says, okay, you're going to take me to see, you're going to put me in the same prison as my cousin. And then you're thinking, wow, that really tracks pretty well. That's cool. So he comes up with this whole plan, gets the bail. It's fine with going to prison because he wants to go there to protect his cousin. Up until that point, everything tracked and everything was getting a lot of good momentum along with the mystery. And probably around that point, things start to fall off a bit. So then immediately we get the next scene where Don Johnson tells him to leave town. And then I'm thinking, so we're not going to get the part where he goes to prison to protect his cousin. Okay, now his cousin is dead and he's leaving town. And then I start to think of the mechanisms of how a movie works all of a sudden. At this point, I'm thinking, well, how's he going to go back to town if he just left? What's going to make him go back to town? And you shouldn't be thinking like that with a movie. You should just be wondering what's going to happen instead of thinking, okay, I know that something is going to have to happen for him to come back to town. And then you're starting to think, well, I wonder what that is. And obviously we won't get into the contrivance conversation that dominated a lot of what movie did we watch? The Last Seduction. I just didn't buy his friendship with the small little what was she, a lawyer played by Anna Sophia Robb. Didn't really buy any of their chemistry even as friends or as an interaction. I kind of thought, well, that kind of needs to happen just to set up other stuff. But like you said, it's not something that I need to be bogged down on. It was just a thought. I don't really buy that. Next, it was kind of more like that. And I just went with it, but all their interactions and how they work together, I just felt like that was much more of a means to an end. And again, the mechanisms was on display every time they had an interaction. And then when she gets injected with heroin and he has to go back to town, the only thing I thought of was like, so that's how he goes back to town after leaving 2 minutes before. And he just felt like she was just in place to allow that scene to happen and for him to have a reason to go back to town when he leaves. And he shouldn't really feel that about a character. So yeah, that was a problem. But again, it was more just like, okay, could have been better, next. And I kind of found the plot got so convoluted, I kind of found it hard to follow. So I was thinking, so they have all this equipment that they rent out to other departments and then they keep these people in prison for a certain amount of times to make money. And I thought, okay, fine. But there was so much back and forth. Like the the woman police officer then, I was thinking, so is she on the level or is she not on the level? Is she okay with the poll clerk or is she not? Or is she just okay with the poll clerk woman, but she's not okay with Aaron Pierre? So now she's helping them and now she's not. And then by the end of it, then when the other cop gets involved and starts turning on all these other cops, and the Aaron Pierre character goes, Serpico. I started thinking to myself, so is that the cop that knocked him off the bike to begin with? Correct me if I'm wrong. So now he's helping. And then I'm thinking, so if let me take it on its merits that he was trying to stay undercover, and that's why he's getting involved in all this police behavior. So he has to knock random people off the bike to get the money. But now, after doing a very good undercover job, almost too good, to the point where it's almost unbelievable, now he's at the very end when he's surrounded by cops, he's taking this moment to try and put a gun on all the cops and arrest them. It just got a bit confusing to me. And it just got a little bit too conspiracy and throwing these things in. Okay, now James Cromwell, he also works with the police, but he seems like he's doing it for her good. Like, whether I believe that or not, which I don't, that was probably what he believed on some level of how to justify it. But why are all these things being thrown in? And why have we got so far from the good stuff that I was enjoying earlier? So yeah, I thought the wheels really fell off it once it started to get that side of the film, and it just got a little bit uninteresting to me at that point, and we lost that stranger walks into town that is possibly has the ability to be a loose cannon, but is so controlled, and we're just going to keep that tension going until the end. Now, I did really like that end sequence as well, with that shootout where he starts getting the smoke grenades and starts taking out all the guards and uses all this camouflage. Like you said, that wasn't the most brilliantly choreographed action sequence, but the dynamic that was brought into it by the fact that this guy isn't killing anybody and still taking them out, that was really cool, where he's almost going around like Batman. Just, I won't kill anybody. And we just got to see it in a very guerrilla warfare down in the Paul Greengrass type camera angles and shots. I thought that was really cool. And then we do get the moment where he breaks the arm of one of the cops, and you're thinking, shit, which is usually completely different to what we normally get in the Jeremy Saulnier movies, where it's just a lot of deep, dark violence. But in this, you just get that one moment with a broken arm that's just shocking, which is almost like a de-escalation in our own kind of what we're used to in these type of movies. It plays against what we feel about violence, what we think about violence, especially in the Jeremy Saulnier movie. So yeah, lots of very good scenes, lots to admire, lots to enjoy. Ultimately, the second half of the movie gets worse and worse, and it puts itself into plot points and puts itself in a lot of exposition that didn't really matter. But yeah, quite a fan of the guy still.
Hey man, Saturday evening now. Just catching up on the day's football. I've been out shopping all day. I'll try and get in a bit of a voice note here now, but I've got my son with me and he might start crying. So yeah, I think we're probably fairly in agreement about this film. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think we both enjoyed it quite a lot. Probably would both recommend it, had a good time with it. Both continue to be fans of Saulnier after watching this movie. But it's undeniably got its flaws. And I think the big thing, and which you've highlighted throughout your voice note there, is just like, it it does something incredibly well in its first 45, 50 minutes, and then it just goes away from that. And it's almost perplexing because you go, if you're able to make the first 50 minutes of Rebel Ridge, then why don't you make that for another 45 minutes and then let that be the movie? You know, if you're able to do that, then give me that, let that be the movie. Don't give me that and then give me like a dull televisual crime conspiracy forgettable plot thing. And that is sort of backed up by the fact that then when we go into the final 30 minutes, they switch back into just efficient, lean, lone wolf versus corrupt police force movie. I couldn't care less about their plot, their plan. Like it's almost like, you know, when you get the first movie in a franchise where it's like there's just a guy with a knife and he's crazy and he's coming to kill teenagers, and that's brilliant. And then with every additional movie, they're building more lore in. I don't need to know about his mother. I don't need to know how he got the hook in his hand. It actually makes him less scary. So this film actually kind of gives you the stuff that you don't care about, all that lore and stuff right there in the first movie. We don't even need to get into a sequel before they bog it down with pointless explanations. And it's surprising how entertaining and how just expertly done the first 50 minutes of this movie is, when then you have to question if Sonia really does understand what is entertaining in a movie or not. But anyway, it's not awful. I think even in that weaker hour or so, it is still, there's still good stuff, good ideas coming up, good bits of acting and stuff, but it's just, you know, it's not the good part of the movie. It's the more forgettable part of the movie. Just running through some of the points you made there in your voice note. I agree that Aaron Pierre's still energy, that as you quite brilliantly highlighted there, the fact that he's calm and not like he's almost monotonous, but he's emotional. That is rare to see. I mean, I'm thinking by contrast that the likes of Vin Diesel, where it's like stoic, monotonous, calm, collected, but all of that just feels really shallow and thin. Whereas this guy, in his calm, cool scenes, he feels like a real emoting individual, a real human. And again, I think that's the strength of getting like someone who's an actor, like an actual real actor. He's not a wrestler. He's not a stuntman. He is an actor, even though he looks like he's coming from more of a action position. That's just the, you know, they've struck gold here, kind of like, you know, Christian Bale at times, where they've got someone who's completely jacked and looks like a really formidable physical opponent, but is also a fantastic actor. So yeah, great revelation for me in this movie. Like I said, I'd seen him in one movie before, but a forgettable movie, and also happens to be a terrible character that he was playing before. Probably the worst named character in film history, the character he plays in Old. Anyway, I'll let you go and check that out if you want. I love the Wi-Fi scene. It was brilliant. That staging. I was actually a little bit let down because they build it up so well. I mean, it's probably one of the best, if not the best, build-up I've ever seen to finding out the truth about a character. That then when we get that he's like from the Marine Corps martial arts program or whatever, that's cool and that's badass, but it's almost like they built it up so well. They could have, I was almost expecting them to hit it out of the park even more. Like, oh, this guy, actually, he's been like dishonorably discharged because he killed like 24 Marines when he was out in Iraq. He went crazy and he's like the most wanted man in America. Like I was expecting something like just the most high scale stakes thing ever, especially because then he doesn't, I know he massively controls the situation by like disarming Don Johnson and all that, but we don't get a kung fu kick, like a big action scene there. So, but yeah, the build up, the ratcheting the tension, this is what we've seen in Green Room. I mean, again, I can't remember Blue Ruin like you, but I feel like Blue Room did very well in like making you lean forward in your seat, pay attention, get more and more invested. He knows how to pull you in. most movies, I mean, certainly most contemporary movies that I see now, it's like they might never have your attention, even by the time the credits roll at the end. But if they do manage to get your attention, it's going to take some time. Whereas Solnier manages to get you wanting to see more of the movie right from the get-go. So yeah, and that Wi-Fi scene is perfect example of his strengths as a filmmaker. I like your point about how he's kind of emasculating these cops, and it is. I can't think of another movie where the action hero basically goes, "I don't even need to kill you. Like, I don't even need to really take you down in a brutal way. I'm so beyond you in capabilities that I can almost just like do that thing that you do with like your younger sibling, where you like hold them away from you with your arm and they're flailing about, and you're like, no, you got nothing on me, kind of thing. Like that's badass. But to see it played out in that kind of balletic, highly choreographed action movie way is brilliant. Like sometimes when you watch like John Wick and stuff, and I love the John Wick movies, but like he's just killing so many people that you're like, what is this? Is this like, this is almost like watching a looping gif of just him killing and killing and killing and killing. And the action's great, but on a character level, it's pretty shallow, because it's just, he's basically the greatest mass murderer in history. And I'm not saying that like completely gets in the way of the movie, but it's a missed opportunity in a sense of having your protagonist of your film just not one tiny atom of them cares about, the human life or whatever. Whereas this is the, extreme opposite end of that. What else? Just looking at my notes and what you've said. The other cop, so the sort of third in command, I mean, it's not literally third in command, but, who we identify, the guy who sort of first pulls him over in the opening scene. I like what you said about the complexity of that character. Now, I disagree that he's Serpico. I think Serpico is supposed to be the black female cop. And he is more supposed to be someone who is a corrupt cop, like completely hook, line, and sinker in cahoots with them, but there's lines that he won't cross. Now, these guys haven't been killing people, right? It's not like our heroes walking into the den of repeated murderers. These guys they've got their scam, they've got their, scam that basically gives them money, and it's almost just like stealing money from people. But the how far they're willing to go in this movie in terms of like just killing people is not something that has been sort of habitually part of their MO. So for that cop that you're describing, I think the one who initially pulls him over, he has his own code. He's not a good guy. He's not a nice person or anything. But at the end of the movie, he's sort of been asked to go a step further than he as an individual will go. And he's like, no, I'm out. I'm out now. And now that I'm out, I'm obviously with the other guy. It's not like they're going to end up being bosom buddies. He's not like a heart of gold at the end of it, but he is ultimately in opposition to his former brethren. And I really like that. I love when the baddies, quote unquote, are more complex and individualistic than just some sort of hive mind where every single one of them can just be taken as like a clone of the leader. I much rather they all would go about things different ways. They all kind of want something that's good for them. Maybe it's common. Maybe they all want money, right? Whatever it might be. But they have their own individual reasons for kind of going in on it. And yeah, I think this film does like a fairly good job at that. Green Room, I think, also had a little bit of that. We're coming together in the fact that we're now wanting to kill the punk band, but we're all a bit different in what we want out of this life and out of this kind of enterprise of the neo-Nazi cult or whatever it was. He's starting to pipe up now. Might have to cut this voice note short. Just another couple of things he said there about like you were intrigued by his master plan to get into prison. And it is a brilliant master plan. And it's great to see him like taken down by that taser or whatever. And then you're like, oh, he's got what he wants. It's almost like Prison Break or something. He's engineered this situation. Even when he's caught, he's the one in control. And then they don't give you that, like you said. They don't give you the prison scene. It's almost like Saulnier wrote up to there in the script. Then he started writing the prison stuff, and he was like, this isn't working. Let's go back to that point just before he goes to prison and then change it. But let's not rewrite any of that earlier stuff. And it's very similar to that moment where he is pushed out of town and he leaves town, and then, like you said, something has to happen to bring him back. In this case, it's the faked overdose thing. And in both cases, we get the build up to something and then an immediate reversal on it. And it's stuff like that where I'm thinking, it's not like this doesn't make sense. It's not like there's a plot hole, so to speak. It's more that you're not giving me the slickest, most polished and refined journey here for my main character. I'm kind of, every time it feels a little bit random, his motivations or what he's doing or what he's up to, or every time one of these kind of left turns or these sort of deflation of where you felt the film was going happens, you start to care less about his journey. And again, it all sort of comes back to, I cared so much at the beginning. It's kind of like First Blood. You care so much about Rambo and his position. And if 40 minutes into Rambo, it said 3 weeks later, and it's Rambo's staying in a hostel 2 towns over, and he's befriended some people, he's locked into a personal situation there. You're like, oh, now I care less because you're giving me, it's not like it doesn't make sense, but you've given me less direct storytelling. So yeah, that's starting to take shape in my head now. It's been a couple of days since I watched it, and I'm starting to forget some of the details, but think more broadly about my arc, my experience with the film watching it. And I think it's like amazing first 50 minutes, and then it just loses its way a bit and gets too complicated. And again, not complicated in a way of like, I don't know what's going on, but complicated in a way of like, you got about 2 to 3 things going on in this movie that I don't care about now. And previously you had only one thing in the movie and I deeply cared about it. Like you said, the relationship with the lawyer. So it's not that entertaining or interesting. It doesn't work that well. And it's not essential to this movie. The movie's already doing fine before you bring in all that stuff. But yeah, still a very good movie, and still looking forward to more Saulnier.
Yeah, I ultimately enjoyed it, to be clear. You do wonder sometimes with filmmakers like this, and I'm completely speculating because I don't really know anything about Jeremy Saulnier in terms of interviews, in terms of reading anything about him. Well, it does amaze me with filmmakers a lot of the time, where they do something really well and then they're almost not content with that. As in, and again, this is pure speculation, but it's almost like, not to say they're ashamed by what they're good at, but they're almost unfulfilled. And I often wonder, and just taking this example as a case study or whatever, that he's just such a genius at ratcheting up tension, keeping things going. And why wouldn't you lean into the complete package of that as a filmmaker? And I often think that these directors, and it's almost like Pep Guardiola when he's so good at a tactic and then he makes these strange decisions at cup finals and things like that. Whereas I feel like if you're maybe in Hollywood and making movies sometimes, especially in America, it seems that you'd wonder if that question seeps into filmmakers' minds. I'm not just going to make a thriller. I'm not just going to make an action movie. I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to make my film have something to say. And lots of people love that. I'll probably give you critical adornment, probably more likely to have you respected in the circles you mix in. Hell, maybe even the public at large might like it more. But for me personally, every thing in this movie that could potentially be put down to political commentary, cultural commentary, that's gets away from what I want to see and what the film starts driving to initially, makes the film a less a movie. Okay, we're gonna make a comment on bureaucracy. We're gonna make a comment on police inadequacy, police corruption. I'm gonna show you how defendants are processed and what type of absolute bullshit goes on. And for me, in a movie like this and how it's packaged, at least, it makes me like, it almost counters it. Obviously, you can give me a movie that has all these elements if it's fully engaged in that. But if you're trying to package a thriller action movie and everything you do that's maybe I get a sniff and start to think, are you trying to tell me something here? Was there something that you saw on the news while you were writing this that you thought would be cool to put in? Are you trying to put in all these elements because you want your movie to be more than what it would be? And when I question why certain things are in a movie, then you haven't done a good job with it in a way, because I don't mind anything in a movie really if it just works in line with it and what it feels in a genre sense and thematically. But that's just a side thought. But I do agree with your Rambo comparison. We want it to ratchet up with its tenacity. We want the pedal to be kept on the gas. And it almost reflects the stakes and reflects the tension. So we almost can't get a respite from the action, or it breaks the illusion that someone's trapped in this environment. And some of the best movies always find a way to keep the person in the environment. Rambo does that. Absolutely. There's probably other movies as well that do that very well as well, where you just don't really get a break from it. I know this is pure sci-fi, but Mad Max does it as well, where you just really don't feel like you get much of a moment to break from the tension that you're trying to embody in this world. And by the way, Serpico wasn't my words. It was the words of the main character, Terry. He's the one that calls the cop Serpico. And this is my point. I don't know if you remember this or what, because I thought that was it and I had to look it up afterwards, but I also like the complexity of the bad guys, but I don't like what they ended up doing with that deputy Marsden guy, the taller, more heavier set cop, looks a bit like David Morse. Can't remember the actor's name. It turns out that he is the informant, because we thought it was going to be the Jessica Sims character, the other black cop in the department, probably the only one. We thought she was the informant, but it turns out that it was Officer Marsden that was the informant. That's this thing that happens. And at that point, the character played by Ampere, Terry, says Serpico. And then it just turns out, oh, okay, he was the informant and he's doing this and that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, cool, but I kind of liked him when he was the cop that rammed him off the bike. Now it's just, I don't know, that didn't really work with me. I like complicated characters, like you say. I like characters have their own lines, but now you're throwing something at the very last minute that makes the film less than, and I think that's the problem. So and this is why I was saying to you that I got very confused over who's working for who and who's doing what by the end of the movie. Because I thought the Jessica Sims character was the informant, and then it turns out it was Officer Marsden, who is one of the biggest dickheads in the opening scene. So is he just playing the long game? Is he trying to get out of it? Is he just acting as one of them to keep undercover? I don't know. The film is not interested enough in it, rather than here's a twist, folks. So I didn't really like that. But these are just minor quibbles to a very decent experience. Even though this movie is a movie of two halves in many ways, it makes me more excited for what Jeremy Saulnier does next. It doesn't make me think, oh, fuck this guy. It keeps me on the bandwagon, actually, because there's so many really good scenes in this movie. And like you said as well, the part where we think we're going to get that moment where he goes to prison, I guess that would be too much like Cell Block, whatever, with Vince Vaughn. So maybe there was some rewrites, I don't know, or maybe there was just, nah, I'm not going to do that now. But it just feels like such a perfect moment, and then we get a different movie. But it's the scene to scene genius is what's going to keep bringing me back to Saulnier, because he does things that other people can't do. So yeah, good movie.
Have you gone back and checked that Serpico thing? Because my memory, and I don't trust my memory as far as I can throw it, but my memory is very clearly him calling the female cop Serpico, and identifying her as the informant, and even a scene where he says to her, "Look, the lawyer girl didn't give you up, but you know, it didn't take much to put two and two together. You're really the only one it could have been," kind of thing. And like, it's very clearly established that she's Serpico. And I don't remember him calling the heavyset cop Serpico later in the movie. But but if that does happen, and I have no memory of it happening, but if it does happen, I wonder, is that him sort of going, look, now you are with us, kind of thing, rather than he was the informant. But yeah, anyway, I guess if you, in your viewing of it, you had that like muddy waters of like, wait, he's been the informant the whole time, but he's one of the worst ones. Whereas I had the female one is the informant, which kind of like fits the whole movie, and he then reaches his break point and sort of gets on side of that point. So for me, that I just didn't have that issue, and it sounds like it kind of overly complicated a film that was already like sort of trying to overly complicate itself for much of its runtime. But anyway, that's just a tiny little detail. yeah, I do feel that there's a lot of directors who master something and then are unfulfilled by that, which is, you know, a healthy impetus for an artist. I mean, if you look at like the Beatles and like many of the best artists of all time, Kubrick, it's like they're always going outside their comfort zone, pushing themselves to do new things. And um, the artists that have really become legends in many cases are artists who like were not just a one-trick pony. They did something amazingly well, and then they completely switched lanes and did something else amazingly well. I'm thinking of like Schindler's List as an example of that. But I think the times when it works are incredible, and they, you know, as I said, you achieve some sort of legendary status. But much more often it doesn't work, and sometimes I feel like with certain directors, I'm like, get back to what you were good at. You know, it's good that you tried something different, but it's not working. Get back to what you're good at. And I think a lot of the time it's that them switching to something that isn't working for me is also bringing enormous financial reward. So James Cameron, for example, who's like, we switched to more of a kind of family friendly fare. I would like to see him do something more down and dirty adult action movie, but he is, you know, the most successful director of all time, financially speaking. So why would he, kind of thing? And there's a lot of examples that I think of, like, it's you've moved away from, it's kind of like a band, you know, you like the early, more DIY punk stuff, and then you don't like the stadium rock stuff, but you get it. Like, every time they make one of these albums, they all get like a bunch of new mansions around the world. Like, but when it's not even doing that for them, it's, as you said, it could be a case of like, I don't want to be labeled a one-trick pony. I don't want people to, like, for example, I'd say Edgar Wright is at some point soon probably going to try his hand at an Oscar movie because he'll want that validation. And it might be good, it might be bad, but it'll probably be like, probably won't be this unique, only one person in the universe could have made this type of film that, let's say, Shaun of the Dead is. And with Saulnier, after that first 50 minutes, he's a totally in his wheelhouse. He's in fact, I would say I'd have to watch them side by side because I watched them all quite far apart, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that the first 45, 50 minutes of this might even be his best work. It might not have as killer a concept as the other ones, but just in terms of on a filmmaking level, like on a directing level, on an editing level, acting, like it's all coming together so well in terms of showing what he does. And yeah, what was it? We'll never know, probably. I mean, it's not the type of thing that gets asked in interviews, and if it is asked, it doesn't really get answered authentically. But there was something about just seeing that movie, that version of the movie out, that wasn't fulfilling to him. And I think this film's been very well received, so people maybe liked that broadening of it. In fact, if it was the movie that I think we would both want, where it's just simple, just ratchet up more and more and more, don't get too plot heavy, maybe there's less of an appetite for that. You know, we're just two people in the world. Like, maybe people want more of a complexity in the narrative. But anyway, it is interesting. I think it's too early in his career to see, oh, he always backs out of this, or he never is able to give us this kind of thing. This is one movie where he's done that. We'll see what he does next time round. And yeah, it's like you, I'm sort of very much back invested in his career after, what was it called? Was it Hold the Dark?
was that what, like, I'm vaguely remembering Riley Keough hiring someone to go hunt wolves in the area or something. I remember it being a very dull and boring film. I think, did you say that you liked it more? I don't know. Yeah, I was very disappointed by that because I'm looking for, I guess, you know what, it could be okay. It could be coming back to this conversation of like, I go to him because I'm looking for those sort of explosive fireworks and that incredible tension and, oh shit, this situation is fucked up beyond all belief. Like, there's no way out of this now, but like violence or things reaching ahead. And Hold the Dark felt a lot more subdued. And maybe that was, again, him, and this is pure speculation at this point, but I wonder if that's him going, I want to try something different. I think the thing that's very successfully tried in this different is the fact that our hero, our badass martial arts buff, like monosyllabic hero, doesn't believe in violence really, like, or certainly believes in de-escalation. He doesn't want people to get hurt. He doesn't want people to get killed. Now there's also the element of like, if he kills a cop, he's going to jail for the rest of his life, but he is still just like incredibly compelling on screen to see someone controlling the situation rather than, yeah, they walked away from the situation, but there was like 12 dead bodies at the end of it. So yeah, that is, if that's part of the Saulnier, let's do something I haven't done before, let's try something different, then I'm all for that because it harmonizes with what he does best. Whereas the sort of noir plot doesn't harmonize with what he does best at all, especially considering it's not very well done and he's doing something that he's not good at. I think making a compelling thriller plot is really hard, and it's something that most people aren't very good at, and he's not very good at it. But if that's what he wants to do, if he wants to make, let's say, like a crime epic saga, but which I think he could bring a lot to, let's say something like Goodfellas, well, maybe he just shouldn't write it. Maybe he should find a great script, and then I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity along the way to give us the Saulnier tension. Now, my preference is that he doesn't want to do that at all, and he gives us a couple more of these like really basic thrillers of just pure tension. Like, I'm thinking of the film Duel by Steven Spielberg. Like, that kind of stuff, he could just absolutely kill it. And there's so few directors who are making that, and there's so few directors that are equipped to make that, at least to the level he is. So why not? Like, from a purely like selfish perspective, I'm like, why not just do the thing that you're amazing at? Like, thank you, Wes Craven, for almost entirely making horror movies throughout your career. Because if you had felt the need to make Oscar movies and comedies and music and just kind of like mix it up and try and dominate in all these different spaces, then we probably would have just got a whole bunch of awful movies. But because you understood what you were good at, we got great movies. Like, not, of course, he made lesser movies as well, but we got so many great movies that we wouldn't have got if he hadn't been satisfied scaring people. Anyway, again, like I said in the last voice note, we're talking more negatively than we feel about this movie. It's got so much going for it. The first hour or so is so good that makes it essential viewing, I think, for any film buff. And then it closes off in a very satisfying way. The final 25 minutes or so is really good. And then the lesser 45 minutes or whatever it is of the movie, it's got good ideas. It's got decent things, but it's just a bit all over the place, a bit muddled. So, yeah. Bring on the next Saulnier. You reminded me that this is his second Netflix movie. So if they gave him money after Hold the Dark, which I presume didn't set the viewing figures on fire, then he's probably safe after Rebel Ridge to make another one. Oh yeah, little tidbit. I was reading the IMDb trivia, and apparently John Boyega was in the lead role, and they filmed, now I doubt this is true, but it says they filmed half the movie, and then Boyega left the project for some reason. It's not the type of thing it's not the type of information that would be that easily available, I'd imagine, but something big must have happened, because leaving a project halfway through is A, disastrous to the project, B, disastrous to Boyega's career because it makes him seem like an incredibly volatile hire. And as annoying as that must have been for the production, I'm not a big Boyega fan, really. I don't think he's awful. I think he's fine in supporting roles. Like, I'm thinking of like Detroit, for example, like kind of a bit of a innocent, like, guy. Like, I just can't see him working in this part. And Aaron Pierre absolutely smashes it. So, yeah, must have really messed with the numbers, but at least we got a great performance out of it from Aaron Pierre.
Yeah, I read that about Boyega as well. And it's funny because his rep, I found it quite bizarre as well that someone would leave halfway through. But his rep said something he left for personal reasons. And all these rumors that he left because of other reasons are unfounded and malicious. But there was an interview with Solner there the other day that I saw a few quotes from, and it would seem to like contradict that completely, because he says something like, I'm not going to say why John left out of respect, but it had to happen. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't seem like family trouble to me, the way that's framed. That's not framed like that. But yeah, I just sent you from 3 different sources the fact that the Officer Marsden is the Serpico and is the leak. So just in case that I got it wrong, which I doubted that I did, but it can happen, of course. So I'm pretty confident saying it's canon that. And it was pretty clear to me when I'm watching, although it was so muddled and so ridiculous, I had to stop and say, what? So I can understand why you thought the woman was the leak the whole time, because it is set up like that. And then it turns out she isn't, but she still helps on one level. And then it turns out the cop who caused most of the shit at the beginning is the leak. So that was way too convoluted and complicated for me. And it speaks to that fact, considering you didn't even know he was the actual leak. It's very confusing, very, very confusing. And I almost liken the final third of this film, minus the brilliant set piece at the end, I almost liken it to Trap, in the sense that we've got a great setup, we've got great things going on early on, and then by the final bit of the movie, I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous, but I'm still invested and we're still getting cool things and I'm still on board. It's just, I'm thinking what a lot more now, and I'm thinking that there's things that are pretty ridiculous to me, whereas early on I was just so invested in the heaviness of the back and forth of, I'm gonna outsmart you, what's this guy thinking, and all these questions. So the film never lost me, but it did confuse the fuck out of me at a certain point, and it seems like it confused you as well, considering we didn't even know that Officer Marsden was the Serpico character. But it's not, it's really badly delivered. But yeah, Soler is such a good director that I would like to see him get a script of maybe someone that's really hot in Hollywood, some new script that is just so well written, and just get his hands on it, because he's so good at interpreting individual scenes and set pieces as well. So like, it's funny, it's like almost despite some of the ridiculous things that happen, even in those scenes, like the car chase through the field and the scene where the woman cop rams the other cop off the road, all these things are really cool, even when things aren't going particularly cohesively in the story. But yeah, I think he'll get another Netflix next.
Yeah, he's a real dab hand at just like showing an interesting way for something to go down. And I think he's better at like simmering tension than he is at actual action. Not that he's bad, but like, yeah, it might be interesting to see him like team up with more of a choreographer. Yeah, that's interesting about that Officer Marsden thing. I mean, the version of the film that I watched, like in my head, where the female officer is Serpico, makes a lot more sense and is a lot more satisfying. But it'd be interesting to sort of rewatch it, because you've sent me some screenshots here of like articles saying that Marsden is Serpico, but none of them actually substantiate that claim. They just say that he is. So I wonder, what is it in the film that clarifies that? Because he, at some point, if I'm remembering correctly, he says to the female officer, "I know that you're Serpico," and she doesn't really respond. So you could take from that, oh, she isn't Serpico. She's just sort of like going along with it or whatever. And then she saves the day at the end. And Marsden, I don't remember anything in the film that indicates that he is Serpico. So I would be interested to see if we get confirmation of that in the film. It is, I agree with you, a worse outcome if he is Serpico, because it calls to question, so what was it? Was it a guilty conscience where he was like completely hook, line and sinker doing all of the bad shit, but there was just some niggling thing in the back of his mind that made him like try and take down the Empire, but really doesn't seem consistent with his character at all? Or was it one of these things where they changed their mind while they were making the film, or when they were writing it? Or yeah, my interpretation was that the female cop was Serpico, but she was like kind of like at the end of the day, the guy, the hero of the film, is at odds with the law, and she is the law, and she's, even despite her knowing that there's like corruption in place and stuff, she still is sort of aligned with the police force, and maybe doesn't quite know how bad and dastardly like her boss is and everything like that. But yeah, it's muddled. It's the most muddled thing that we've identified in this conversation, but there's just a lot of muddled stuff in this film where, again, like I keep saying, it's not that it doesn't make sense per se. It's just that it's not the most elegant storytelling. But yeah, anyway, I think our thoughts net kind of devolved into like going down to like the confusing little finer points. But this film is all about the sensation. I found it really exciting, and often when I throw on a movie, I'm getting restless. I'm kind of, all right, what the fuck is this? Like, if the film isn't amazing and it's just sort of like predictable or whatever, like especially Netflix movies, which I think like weirdly almost feel like a genre onto themselves, with how sort of mediocre yet reliable they are. Like the Netflix movie is just basically, let's not do anything too adventurous. Let's just, even if it's with some sort of like highly acclaimed director that's like come out with some interesting indie film, it's still like they just feel like cookie cutter movies a lot of the times. And I guess that's probably streaming service movies more than Netflix movies specifically, but I seem to have noticed it more with Netflix. I guess that's just because they're the biggest streaming service. But this film didn't have that mediocrity, didn't have that like just to get it done, make the movie energy to it. It was very entertaining and arresting, and really, really strong for so long. Sustaining that for 50 minutes is like so difficult to do, that I've got enough interest in the tank at that point to get me through the next 50 minutes of Jack Reacher bullshit, and then we get back to the good stuff again at the end. So yeah, good movie with its flaws.
Well, the fact that the fact that Officer Marsden is the informant is revealed through the language of cinema, as we talk about. Terry looks at him in a scene where he takes the gun out and turns on the officers and says to himself, Serpico. And he originally said it about the woman cop, so we're meant to infer that. I guess you could say it's never literally stated, you are the informant, but through the camera angles, through words, through the staging of cinema, I think it's definitely there in the film. But like you said, a lot to love about this. And I actually can't wait to see what he does next.
Hey man, just mowing the lawn, trying to get the garden in order one last time before the winter rolls into town. Yeah, I must have missed that. I don't remember that second utterance of the Serpico accusation. And I wonder, when I saw it, either was I not concentrating and I just missed it, or was it more a case of like, I thought that meant now you're one of us kind of thing, rather than you are the one that's sort of been in cahoots all along. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like, if he is Serpico, then, you know, it's just another little bit of messiness in the movie. So it's funny, like when you watch a movie, you don't really, or at least I don't, I never really think about the deleted scenes. And sometimes afterwards you're reading IMDb or Wikipedia and you learn, oh, this deleted scene and that deleted scene shows that Officer Marsden character is actually like tormented over what he's doing, or he's under pressure, or like the Emery Cohen cop like is like, you're either with us or you're not, and like threatening him or something. And I wonder sometimes when I watch these things, is it like they didn't think of something, or they did think of it, but it was better for the overall pacing in the movie that context is cut out. But yeah, in this one, it comes off fairly muddled. Anyway, you know, it's a minor detail ultimately.
What the hell? I just went to start sending you a message there and just realized my cat is on the sink. My goodness, what are you doing there? Trying to attack a candle. Jesus. Chill the fuck out. Anyway, yeah, it is quite a... I can't believe you did that. Yeah, it is quite an interesting point that you make, that to think about the deleted scenes that might have left clarity to things that just seem rushed. Like, it actually might make perfect sense if everything was left in that it should be left in at the script stage, shall we say. There's a few famous ones of that in Terminator 2. There's a scene where it's explained why the Terminator played by, well, the Liquid Terminator, I can't remember his name, why he starts malfunctioning and stuff, and why John Connor doesn't believe it's him when he imitates Sarah Connor, and he realizes straight away. And there's a few other things like that as well. And of course, one of the more famous ones is in Independence Day, where the Jeff Goldblum character talking about, oh, a virus, catch a cold, and how he's able to put the virus into the aliens' technology. But apparently there's a scene that explains that, I think it was integrated at an earlier time or something. They found the software in the 1950s or something, and then they actually built human computers based off that technology or something like that. So the hardware is actually similar, so it's able to be used. I think it's something like that. And so it is interesting to think that if a lot of things that don't make sense in movies or seem a bit muddled are because something's got cut Anyway, enjoy the lawn cutting. I love a good lawn cutting myself.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.